Hey, que Pasa Calexico? Welcome back to the podcast. Like always, before we begin, I want to thank a couple of people. I want to thank my anchor sponsors. I want to thank Camilo, Jake, Edward, John from AmeriCorp, Eddie Lopez from Roots Creative. I want to thank my friends on Dents on Border. If you have any dents or scratches on your car, make sure you contact Dents on Border. You can find them on Facebook. I also want to thank Sergio's Tacos and Hotdogs. With over 8 years of experience serving the Imperial, San Diego, and Yuma counties with Mexicali style hot dogs and taquizas. Make sure you contact Sergio for your next event. His phone number 760-562-0057 or find him on Facebook, Sergio's Tacos and Hot Dogs. Finally, I want to thank David Gastelum. If you're thinking of buying or selling a home in the Imperial, San Diego counties, make sure you contact David. He's not only a realtor, but an investor with over 20 years of experience, and he'll teach you along the way one of the most important investments of your life. His phone number is 760-235-9576. Today, I'm really excited about today's guest because I'm kind of like fanning out a little bit because somebody I recently started going on TikTok and you know into that rabbit hole of TikTok, right? And then she showed up on my I don't know, what do they call the feed, like for you, or I don't know what they call them. I'm too old to know all the TikTok slang, but she showed up on my feed. And I thought it was really funny. Like her videos were really funny, really interesting, and I kind of related to her because I didn't even know she was from a border town as well. But just the things she was talking about resonated with me living in Calexico, a border town. Today, my guest is Edeliz Perez, also known as the voice of Gualmart. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get into, because, usually when I have a guest on, I do a little bit of research, I start stalking people and looking at their Instagrams, their TikToks, their everything, just, doing research. So I found out way more than you just being the voice of, these stores, you do a lot of things besides that. But before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, this is a very open-ended question, so I'll try to be concise. But I'm Edeliz. I'm from Mission, Texas, and it's 15 minutes from the border in Texas. So like El Piquito, like right at the bottom of Texas, like that's where I'm at. And yeah, so I lived here all my life, moved to Austin for school for a while. Moved back because of the pandemic and like different situations. But basically now I find myself doing voice work and I voice for like different companies. So if you go into Gualmart or TJ Maxx or Marshalls or whatever, like you'll hear my voice being like, "Hello, customers," in English and in Spanish. But that's kind of, like a summary.
Yeah, in a nutshell. So where should we start? Should we start with your voice work, your podcast? Oh, you know what? Let's start with living in a border town. You said you live in Mission?
Mission.
Yeah. So what was it for you, growing up in a border town?
Oh, man. So I think the main thing growing up in a border town was that I wanted to get out of the border town and that I was like, I don't know. I think you know what it was? It was TV. I watched a lot of TV and TV, like sitcoms and like all the little white kids on the shows that like that 70s show, like I saw that these kids, were 18 and they left home. They went to college. So I grew up on a bunch of just sort of seeing that in media. Right. And like, obviously not seeing a lot of like Latino representation in media. And so in my mind, I was like, I need to get out. We call it the Valley. I don't know if it's the same thing in California.
Yeah. The Imperial Valley, the Valley. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I need to get out of the Valley. And I'm a first generation American. Like my parents are immigrants and like they never understood my desire to sort of like leave home. And I, of course, like as a kid, like you sort of romanticize leaving to live in a bigger city and like have this amazing life or whatever. But then like once you become an adult, you realize that it's sort of the same shit everywhere. And so I did that, right? Like I moved out, but my whole experience, like living in a border town, was not appreciating it. And also like a lot of the culture, even here, was very whitewashed in a lot of ways, and like I had no idea. And so everyone was sort of like, I think what surrounded me being in a border town was that it wasn't good. Like, there's nothing here for you. Like, you need to get out of here. Like, people who stay here, like, waste their life. Like, all of this sort of rhetoric or dialogue about border towns not being like good enough. So once I left and I was living in Austin for several years, and as I was getting older, I was like, the Valley's great. Like, I love being from a border town. Like, everyone who's from the Valley, in Texas at least, is like, when you find someone from the Valley outside of the Valley, everyone's like, hey, you're from the Valley.
Yeah.
Like, everyone has the same accent. Everyone understands the culture, the vibe. Like, it's such a specific sort of way to grow up. And like, everyone's, you know, not everybody, but like most people are bilingual. And like, you get around, you go to a store, everyone speaks Spanish. And I think like once I left the Valley was when I sort of realized like, oh, not everybody speaks Spanish. Like, not everyone has the same experience that I do. And the tacos in other places suck. And yeah, so with growing up, I think came like that appreciation of where I come from. And, you know, being in a border town is cool because apparently not everyone just goes to Mexico for the dentist like on a Saturday when they want, because everyone's like, oh, you've been to, like, you just go to Mexico casually. It's like, yeah, we go to Mexico to get fucking medicine and to just do random things. And that's sort of the beauty of growing up in a border town and just understanding like I've never met, like, I think you're the first person that I meet from a border town outside of Texas. Because I think people from El Paso have the same, you know, it's kind of the same vibe. But it's still Texas nonetheless. But I don't know, there's an accent, there's like a certain way of life that everyone from a border town understands. And I think it's really cool to like come to like see other people who are also from border towns.
Yeah, I think we speak our own language. Like when it comes to like English and, you know, a lot of people talk about Spanglish, but I think the Spanglish in border towns have a special something that isn't like a Spanglish, like somebody that lives in LA or Texas, so like a bigger city where there is like a Mexican Hispanic culture. You know, our Spanglish is way different than, you know, those bigger cities. Because something that I've noticed, you know, because I'm almost 40 and I've never left. You know what? I watched a lot of TV, but since I grew up, basically on my own. My parents used to, like I said, we live here in Calexico, and my parents used to go to Mexicali every day almost. And then on the weekends, they would go on Fridays, and they wouldn't come back till Sunday night or even Monday morning. So like I basically lived on my own like since I was like 15. So I never really had that urge to leave because it was like I lived on my own pretty much. Yeah. But a lot of my friends did leave the Valley of Calexico, and a lot of my friends or a lot of people that I see that go away for college to a bigger city, bigger community, they come back with this passion for, you know, teaching others about our culture. Like, for instance, like living here, my parents never talked to us about our Hispanic, Mexican culture, our heritage, all these things. And a lot of people that go away to college, university, they come back and they're really knowledgeable and all these things. I'm like, damn, like, what did you notice that, or it was something that happened to you?
Oh, for sure. I think it's because like growing up, like you said, like when you grow up somewhere, like wherever it is, like your house, you know, whether everything has its own little culture. And so everything is normal, right? So for me living in a border town, it's normal to speak Spanglish, let's say. It's normal to see certain things, to know certain people. But then when you leave, you're like, oh, you realize, like, especially somewhere like the Valley in Texas, it's very low income. It's very like underfunded and like schools and things like that. And so you leave and you sort of realize like, oh, you understand like, okay, these schools get more funding because white kids, or these places have more funding because people make more money. And in an area where I live, like, it's not a lot of people make a lot of money because it's low income. So I left and I came back, and I knew and I understood sort of the culture behind the Valley. And like, I understood why so many people want to leave, but I also understood why it's important to come back and to sort of cultivate your community and to meet people. And because I don't know, like, I think there is a really great thing about leaving home. But coming back is always good. Like, you come back and you have like more knowledge about things, and things that like my parents would never have told me or explained to me about my own culture, whatever. And I feel like I'm rambling, but the main thing that I learned leaving was the difference in culture. So I came from, like, as a first generation, like, my family is very collectivist, and the clash in culture that I experienced between my parents and me when I left made me, like, opened my eyes to understanding the difference between like American individualist culture and Mexican collectivist culture. And that whole, like, Mexicans get together for carne asadas and Mexicans are always together, and like you see your fucking 30 cousins every weekend, like, it's a thing. And then you move away and you're like, oh, like, I am by myself and I'm the first person who's like left home, and no one has explained these things to me. And my parents, when I left, like, didn't understand why I wanted to leave. They were like, everything is here. We're all here. Why would you want to leave? You are under our protection. But me, who, has watched American sitcoms, I'm like, but all of these kids leave at 18. Why can't I leave? Like, I saw it as so normal. But it wasn't until I sort of like had that experience and had that culture clash with my parents and my family, being like me, the only, the first person in my family to get a college degree, the first person in my family and extended family to like leave the Valley. There was a huge culture clash, and I had to sort of come to terms with it when I was living away. So now I come back home with this sort of knowledge of how cultures work and how media shapes our experiences, and how how, like, why my parents were so upset at me for leaving and why I didn't understand them. So in so many words, I've learned a lot just like leaving and coming back.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I always watch, and you mentioned media and growing up watching sitcoms. I basically was raised by my tape, not to throw shit at my parents, but it's just that like I said, I was always home alone. I've always been somebody
like
that
independent.
Or like I like to be on my own, and watch a lot of TV and documentaries, or I grew up watching SNL and for a while I wanted to be a stand-up comedian because I always watched stand-up at night. Actually, I actually did do stand-up a couple of times and it was all right. But I don't know, and like I said, maybe because I was always on my own. I was home alone. I could party if I wanted to, like. Because my parents, I lived with my parents till I was like 23, I want to say. And yeah, like it was like I live on my own. Like the weekends, like I could do whatever I wanted. So I'm guessing that's the reason why I never really wanted to leave. Plus, I don't know. And like I like my little town. Whenever I go to San Diego or LA, like I'm always like I get like it's overcrowded for me. Like it's always too fast or too many cars, or I don't like freeways that much. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I never, left the Valley. Plus I was lucky enough to get the job I have now. Like I got it right out of high school. So that's why I didn't leave. But going to the culture stuff, like, did your parents ever talk to you about, I don't know, like, the Aztecs or the Maya, like all these stuff that happened in Mexico?
Oh no, not at all. And I think a lot about it because I was thinking about it recently and sort of thinking about like how I identify in terms of like my Latina identity, so to speak, right? Because it's always like I grew up going to Mexico every weekend or like every couple a couple times a week, I mean. And I never felt super Mexican, but I also never felt super American because my parents always sort of kept me in check, and my dad would say things like, like you're turning into a gringa or like, whatever. Or like he would get upset if I spoke English, and I was like, but I do speak English, and my parents don't speak English. But sometimes I would speak English like with my brothers, and my dad would be like, nah, like he'd get mad, and I'd be like, but why? Like you brought us to this country. I'm sorry. But no, they never, I think because they're from northern Mexico, so they're from Nuevo León, and I don't think that they, had that much of, what's the word? Sort of like education about like the history of Mexico, even though I'm sure they know it. And like my dad is like super knowledgeable, so I'm sure he knows it. But I don't think it was ever something that they wanted to impart, or if they thought that was important to tell us about the Mayans and the Aztecs. Like it was just something like, I guess they figured like, oh, you'll learn in school. But like we barely learn things like that in school. Yeah. And so now you kind of have to learn everything for yourself or learn it on TikTok. You can learn so much on TikTok. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about TikTok. Like, especially like all these like home improvement stuff that I never do. But, you look at them and like, oh, that's so easy. I can do this, but I never do it. I like to cook. So I do make some of the recipes I watch on TikTok. Yeah. I do make them, but... Yeah, and I asked the same question to a previous guest, and he had a really I think he thought about it and it stayed on his mind, because like days later he's like, you know what, you kept me thinking, and I think the reason why our parents never really talked to us about our culture was because we were so busy trying to learn this new culture. And I was like, you know what, that's true. And thinking about it too was recently, when the pandemic passed, all this whole year I didn't see my parents that much. So the last time my parents came, we were talking about my dad growing up and all this, and I was like, you know what? I think the reason why my dad never really talked about it, or maybe he doesn't know much, is because my grandpa died really young. So my dad was like the oldest of they had like 13 brothers and sisters. So he was the oldest. So he was so busy trying to help raise his brothers and sisters that he wasn't worried about learning about his culture and his past. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I think that's why. But I feel that even here in across the border, like I don't see a lot of people talking about their culture or being really proud about like other places. Like here in San Diego, you go to this place called Barrio Logan, and they have a lot of, Mexican, murals and, with different historical figures from Mexico and stuff like that. And you go to Mexicali and I don't see that a lot. And I don't know. I don't know why it is that even in Mexicali, they don't really focus on that as something that they want to put out there as, I don't know. It's weird. It's something that I try to talk about with people that are living in border towns, because I want to see how their experience with that is similar to my experience.
Yeah. And like you said, it's funny because my dad is also the same. Like his dad died very young. And my dad is also the oldest, but he's the oldest of 6. And so he had to, come to America and like figure it out. So yeah, there's no time when you need to like survive. There's no time to think about like the intricacies of the Mexican culture or, but yeah, you're right. Like there really isn't enough sort of like history. I know there's like the history of the valley, and I'm sure if I went to a museum or something, like it would be there, but I don't remember it as something that was like taught in my school or something that I talked about with my friends. Like it's just like, oh yeah, we're here now, and it's whatever.
Yeah, and even with my cousins that live across the border, like it was nothing like that. We never really talked about it. Like sometimes like with my friends, like yeah, we talk about American history because it's I don't know like trivial stuff, like but like with I don't know like it's something that we never bring up when it comes to like our history, our Mexican history. I don't know, just something that I always think about is like. Because, like I said, like people that go away, they come back with so much knowledge about our history. Like, I was like, why did you have to go away to learn something that we have something really? But and not saying like that it's bad that they had to go away, but I'm guessing that they were able to learn and appreciate our culture being away because they took it so granted that they were so near to it. I don't know. That's
like something I actually learned recently about the valley. I mean, I don't know about in California, but here there's a bunch of palm trees everywhere, and everywhere all over the valley there's palm trees. And I guess I never questioned it because they're just around. Like I have palm trees in my backyard and palm trees like on the main road. And I read somewhere that was like the reason there are so many palm trees is because they planted them so it would seem more appealing to the I guess like the business white people who were coming back in the day. So they planted the palm tree so it would seem more of like a tropical paradise because we're an hour from the beach. So apparently like it's a thing, like they put palm trees all over the valley so it would seem more appealing to the white settlers or something coming to the valley. And I was like, oh my god, that makes so much sense. Palm trees don't just grow around here. Like we're not in Cancun.
yeah you drive like whenever we drive to Yuma, like Arizona, like it's like nothing but desert. Like you don't see any freaking palm trees anywhere. Well, moving on from living Mexican white first generation kids growing up in border towns. So you started your podcast and voiceover. Which one came first, the podcast or
the podcast actually. I started the podcast, it's 2021. I think I started it either in 2018 or it must have been 2018 because I started voice work. Okay, let's backtrack a little bit. I've been doing voice work for 5 years, but I've been doing the voice work, the recognizable voice work that I do now for the last about year and a half. So since you know what it is? It's that 2020 is throwing me off and I keep forgetting like an entire chunk of time.
Yeah.
So I started doing recognizable voice work at the end of 2018. And I started my podcast, I believe, at the beginning of 2019. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yes. I just have to keep like telling myself like, yes. Yeah. So I started doing voice work first, and I've been doing voice work since I was in college. But in college, I had a radio show called Pants Optional, and I did it with my friend. And then after the radio show was like, it was fun. There really wasn't like a theme to it. It was just like a college radio show. But then after college, I was like, you know what? It would be really cool to keep up the idea of like Pants Optional, mostly because I liked the name. And I wanted it to be something about transitioning into adulthood, because I felt when I graduated college, and maybe it is because I was, first generation, like no one told me what to expect basically. And so I graduated at 22 and I thought that my life was going to just be like, great. And then it turned out that it's not great. And like finding a job is hard. And like, what is networking? I don't understand LinkedIn. And everything was just confusing. So I figured that I could put all of these thoughts and like make a podcast and talk about things like getting fired, how to find a job, like employment, unemployment, going through the motions of figuring out how to be an adult in this very, like, what I consider a very vulnerable age of like 20 to like 25. And now I'm 26 and I've been doing the podcast for 2 years now. and I've grown a little community, but I definitely want to keep expanding it. And now it's sort of the podcast is sort of changing into more of like self-discovery in adulthood, and I'm tackling more like emotional topics like vulnerability or like boundaries, like friendships, things like that. So it's not just like for a 20-year-old, but can also be, you know, for a 35-year-old or something. And yeah, so the podcast is really like a space for me to dive into these topics that just sort of like sit in my head and that I want to talk about. And I've been like looking for more guests and things like that. And that's sort of the direction the podcast was going. And because I was already doing voice work, I already had a microphone. And so I was working in audio. And so it just sort of came naturally. And yeah, so working in audio eventually like led me into voice work.
Yeah. What was your major in college?
Communication, like media broadcast.
Okay. But voiceover wasn't something that you thought of?
No. So it's funny because I think as a kid, I think you always sort of know what you want to do. And as a kid, I always had this, I don't know about anyone else, but I feel like I was always very connected to myself as a child. And I remember like always doing voices and always like, what's the word, like repeating like the cartoons that I saw, and like everything just sort of like stayed in my brain. And I would say like, oh, I want to have a talk show. Like I want to do this. And I always wanted to work in media. So when I was in college, I had a friend who did voice work because he has like an amazing, like deep radio voice. And we became really good friends. And I was like, I'm kind of interested in this. I was like, I feel like I could do it because I've always felt like I imitated these voices that I hear on the radio and stuff. And so he was like, all right, let me teach you. And so he didn't give me the training that I probably needed. But again, I was like 19 or 20 or something. And so he was like, okay, like you're going to edit out, you're going to cut out your breaths. You're going to record like this. You need to sound natural. And I was like, yeah, like this is fun. I like it. And then when I started doing that, I tried to get on like Upwork and Fiverr and like those freelance sites. Mm-hmm. And then what ended up happening was that I applied to this job as an audio editor for the company that does all of these advertisements. And so being in the company, they found out that I had also had experience with voice work, and they were like, okay, we can bring you on as a voice talent as well. So I was both an audio editor and a voice talent. And that's how I am doing the voices today, is because I still work contractually as a voice talent for this company, if that makes sense.
Do you still edit for the company or just do the voiceover?
No. Yeah, I just do the voiceover.
Okay. And you do everything from home?
Correct.
But is it because of the pandemic, or is it or before would?
Yeah, so because of the pandemic, I was basically let go from my last job, but I stayed on as a voice talent. And because everything was happening from home, because back then they used to have the voice talents go into the studio and record in person. But of course, the pandemic was like, everyone has to set up their own studio. And so I've set up like a home studio, and I work from home now, which is, you know, more than convenient, of course.
Yeah, for sure. And when it came to, you know, your setup, because I was watching one of your TikToks, you explained, you know, your whole setup. Because I'm like an audio junkie too. Like, I mean, not like a big audio junkie, but you know, I know because of the podcast, you know, I'm always like looking at, dreaming of having like these mics and these mixers. Right now I'm using a PodTrack P4. I don't know if you can see it. Mm-hmm. Which is really cool because I can plug it into my computer and I can stream and use my mic, and I can also take it with me, because before the pandemic I used to do my podcast like at local restaurants, because like to me it was like, you know, if I do it at a local restaurant, it's kind of like a win-win for everybody because, you know, I always thank the people I'm doing the podcast at, you know, the place, the restaurant. And people that walk into a restaurant or would see me like, oh, what is he doing? And, you know, they learn about the podcast as well. So like to me that I really like this because it's really mobile and I can take it with me and record my podcast. And I saw that you have what is it? The USB.
The Focusrite.
Yeah, Focusrite.
Yeah.
Did you have to, you know, like how did you get into, you know, knowing what mic to buy and what interface to buy?
Yeah. So working when I was an audio editor, like that was sort of my main introduction into sound equipment. And I had these two gorgeous studio monitors. I had 3 computer monitors in front of me. I had like the Focusrite interface, and it was like for 4s. It was like the bigger one. And I can't remember the mic we used to use, but basically like everyone who worked there was like an audio junkie basically. So then when I decided to set up my own studio, I was like, well, I need studio monitors and I need, you know, this whole setup. But because I'm now working from home, like I knew that I needed to sort of downsize because I don't have that much space. And I was like, okay, I need a Focusrite audio interface. And I looked up a good voiceover microphone that wouldn't like cost me $500. And even just this, I like had a budget. I think my budget was like $1,000 or something like that. And I spent my entire budget on the audio interface, the microphone, the monitors, and some other thing like a desk or something. But I just looked up like what's like the best voiceover microphone. And even now, like the microphone is good. I like it. I don't hate it, but I would like to have like a fancier condenser microphone or something. But the interface is cool because like it's just me, so I don't need a big one or anything.
Yeah, and that happened to me too. Like I have like 3 mics right here on my desk, like this one, this one. And I have like a snowball, I remember. I bought that one when Radio Shack was closing and it was like half off, so I wouldn't have got it. But yeah, like every time I get like this one, I just got it and it was like I want a better mic now, even though this one sounds really cool. But yeah, like it's a disease, like in the background. I don't know if you see all my Funkos. I have an addiction for those too. But you know, luckily I've been able to, you know, because of my sponsors. Thank you, sponsors. I've been able to upgrade my setup a little bit because before I had an actual like mixer that I carried in a box, and then I had like a digital recorder that I would plug in my. It was like a pain in the butt, like having to carry everything. But I mean, I haven't been able to use this because the pandemic, you know. But hopefully, you know, I already got my vaccine, so hopefully I can.
So you're like, I'm ready to go out there.
Yeah, actually, I was in the AstraZeneca trial, so I've had my vaccine since like late November. So.
Oh wow, amazing!
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't know I had my vaccine since late November, but I didn't find out till like a month ago maybe because they couldn't unblind me until the vaccine was offered at my job, so they had to unblind me. But I digress. So going back to the voiceover, so the jobs you get are given to you by the company you work for?
Yeah. So the company I work for is the one that like works with like these bigger brands, like Walmart, like Home Goods or Petco or whatever. And so they're my ex-boss basically sort of started setting me up to voice a little bit more, like, oh, hey, can you do a demo? And we'll see if like Petco likes your voice, or we'll see how Walmart feels about your voice. And I was definitely the youngest. Yeah, I was the youngest person in my office and also voice talent. And there was sort of where I got more formal training for how to read ads, because everyone, like, I'm not going to hate on people. Like, everyone wants to do voiceover. Like, that's just a given. Everyone's like, this is cool. How can I get into it? But like, it's hard. And I said it a lot, like, everyone's like, well, I have a good voice. Like, how do I do this? And I'm like, well, it's not just about having a good voice. It's you need the training. I haven't even had enough training. Like I'm not trained as a voice actor. I think I'm trained as just like voiceover, and I'm good at reading ads because I know the emphasis and I know how to try and sound conversational. And those tend to be the more important things when you're recording like a radio ad, because like if you listen to like a 90s radio ad or just something like from the early 2000s, I listened to this radio station in the Valley called 96.1, and it's Recuerdo. And so they're all like old, like 80s, 90s Mexican songs. And all of it's like, todos nos escuchamos así. Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no one talks like that anymore. Like that's super outdated. Like now when you hear an ad, especially when you're listening to podcasts, ads are much more natural sounding. And you want an ad to feel like not an ad and to feel like an experience. So yeah, like everyone's like, how do I do this? And I'm like, honestly, I don't even know how I have this job. It was by sheer luck that I have this job, and also just like a little bit of training. And I feel like I was really just sort of set up at the right place at the right time. So I'm like, I can't help you. I can't help you voice like the way that I do, because I just got really lucky. And I think a lot of people find it really interesting because, you know, I don't think it's interesting because I've been doing it for a couple of years. And, you know, at some point you're just sort of like, yeah, it's my job. Like it's whatever. But I realized through TikTok, because of all of the comments and stuff, everyone's like, oh, I thought it was like an old white lady named Susan or, you know, things like that. And I'm just like, no, like it's me. Like I'm just here. And yeah, people don't expect the voice that they hear in most places to be, you know, younger, to be Mexican, to be, you know, anyone other than like an old white lady. And even being a woman in voiceover is super hard. And yeah, so the job itself, I think, isn't like as it's not as exciting. It's not as glamorous, you know. It's not like, oh, I have an agent and my agent got me this job and I auditioned. Like I really didn't do that. I just got really lucky. And yeah, and it's cool to like get on TikTok and to find these people who are like, oh, hey, I heard you here. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
Do you know how far they, you know, is it like all Walmarts or all?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like nationwide.
Oh, wow. Because
Yeah.
you know what, and I'm gonna start paying attention because normally, like whenever I go to Walmart, because before the pandemic, I haven't been like I've been inside of Walmart, but only to like the garden area, like in and out. But before, like I would be the one that go get groceries for the house, but I would take advantage of that time to put in steps and to listen to a podcast. So like,
Yeah.
I would hate people like. And hopefully nobody gets offended from Calexico, but I didn't like people coming up to me and saying hi or talking to me because like normally I was listening to something. So I was like, I would always try to keep my head down and just like mind my business because I was listening to something. So like I'd never really pay attention to, I didn't even know like Walmart had like voiceovers. Like I don't even remember like music or anything on their speakers, right? So yeah, next time I go inside, I'm gonna pay attention, see if I hear you here in Calexico as well. But
yeah, people don't listen. I don't even listen. I like to listen to podcasts too when I go out shopping.
Yeah, like that's my because normally people listen to podcasts on their commute, right? My commute is like 5 minutes. You know, I listen to the intro of a podcast and I'm already home. So like, yeah, like that was my thing, like go to Walmart, listen to a podcast and put in some steps on my phone, you know? So yeah, like next time I'm gonna, but I do remember like going to like TJ Maxx or other stores where I do hear like even Lowe's. I don't know if you do Lowe's?
No,
or?
I don't do Lowe's.
Okay. But yeah, like Walmart, I had never really paid attention to their voiceovers, and you know, and like yeah, like I think most of the voiceovers that I listen to are female. Do you think it's only do you think it's only like supermarkets or clothing stores that are female?
They tend to be, yeah. And I'm sure that has something specific to do with like women and shopping. Women be shopping.
Yeah.
And yeah, so if women be shopping, they want to hear women be like, hey. Also, I think I just got this other voice job, and it's going to be for like an emergency, sort of like emergency announcements. And the reason they ended up going with my voice instead of a male voice was because I don't know if it's a statistic. I think it is a statistic or some kind of data that people respond better to women's voices in times of like crisis or like in times of emergencies. They just feel more soothed by a woman's voice compared to a man's voice. Which I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Like if if we need to evacuate a building, I don't want to hear a man be like, get out of here, whatever. Like you want to hear like a calm woman's voice. Like it just does something to you. But yeah, no, it definitely is all women now. That I never thought about that actually. It is women that do retail voices.
Yeah, because I kind of like remember going to Lowe's and listening to a man talk about, it's a male voice talking in the speakers because it's a hardware store. But yeah, like I do remember going to like, I don't know, like Marshall's or any other store, and it's a female voice. And yeah, it's because I mean, supermarkets or people that sell stuff, like they do a lot of research, like the colors they use on their labels, the way they put the products on the shelves, all that is some kind of science that they already studied. So
it's all marketing. Yeah, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So what do your family and your parents think about your job? Like, do they find it like? Yeah,
I guess it's unconventional in a way. It's a weird job. I think I told myself at the beginning of 2020, before the pandemic, I sort of I've always been interested in media. I've always known that media was sort of the direction that I wanted to go into. And I had my last job, right, as an audio editor. I was working 9 to 5, and that was fine. I was okay. But I, always told myself like, okay, like I don't want to be here for longer than like 2 years or something like that. And I want to be a podcast producer. Like maybe I can find a job like that. Or really what I wanted to do is work for myself. But, that's really hard to do. And what ended up happening was that I was let go because of the pandemic. And I was like sort of in a position where I had to figure out how to work for myself because jobs in media were being cut. And finding any freelance job is also very difficult. And that's sort of where I'm at now, right? Where I'm like contract freelancing, I work for myself. And my family was just sort of like, okay, like if this is what you do, that's fine. I don't think anyone has ever understood like I tell them like, oh, I have a podcast. They don't know what that means. I'm like, oh yeah, I do voice work. You can hear me at the little stores. And they're like, oh my God, it's her. Or they're like, oh, I heard you at the outlets. I heard you here. And they're like, you're everywhere. And I'm like, really, I am everywhere. Yeah. And I guess I don't really sit to think about it. And I'm like, I guess that's pretty cool. Like if I told 20-year-old me like, oh, hey, in a few years, you're going to be literally your voice is going to be nationwide. I would have been like, no, that's crazy. What? Yeah, it's crazy because I mean, it's like you said, it's unconventional, but it's like you're everywhere, Yeah, it's not like you like people. Oh yeah, I heard you because you were like on the radio or like you sing or something, right? But like you're doing ads. Do they play any ads on the radio though? Like the ones that you make? No, I think I have done radio ads before. But they've been in like very specific locations. I think I did some for Five Below, the store. I'd never been in a Five Below. I still haven't been in a Five Below. I didn't even know what they sold. But I think I did a radio ad for a couple of them for Five Below. But yeah, nothing like local yet. I think it would be cool to do. I just don't know how to go about that yet. Yeah. Yeah, and that was one of my questions is like anybody local like try to hire you for like side thing, not with your company? No, not yet. Honestly, I should get on TikTok and do that. I need to tag because you know how like there are certain, I mean, I don't know if you like use TikTok, but being that I'm, doing videos on TikTok, I've noticed that if I use certain hashtags, it gets like more views than if I use like a hashtag, like say RGV, which is Rio Grande Valley. So if I use like an RGV hashtag, it's going to stay pretty local. So I should probably do that actually, like RGV, like hire me for something.
Yeah. Yeah. Like drive by like a local shop and do a little quick ad.
Yeah, I should. That's a good idea. I need to do that.
I don't use, I spend like hours on TikTok, like watching stuff, but
yeah,
I feel that, I'm too old for TikTok. I don't know.
You'd be surprised.
No, that's the thing. Like I see people that are kind of my age, like doing like those dances and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. But like, yeah, like there is, a really, I know that I could use TikTok to grow my podcast or, my social media. And I just I don't really like, right now, like we're doing this Zoom thing, but like having it on full screen and it's just you, like I can see like the little corner of me, but I'm not too comfortable with the camera. I'll stream sometimes on Twitch. I'll play video games, but the same thing, it's just a little me right here, not the big me. So I'm not too comfortable with the whole camera thing. Even when I do stories on my Instagram, I kind of feel dumb and too old for that. But yeah, it's something that I should start using. And like I said, that's where I found you. Like I was showing a couple of my friends, oh, look at my next guest. Like, how did that come about? I just reached out and she said yes. So, and going back, we talked about your voiceover, but you do also have a podcast and a website, a blog, and all these things. Can you tell us a little bit about It's Personal?
Yeah, It's Personal with Pants Optional is my podcast, and it started sort of like as a way for me to get my feelings out. And at first I thought I was going to be more journalistic type of podcast, because I listened to a lot of I went through a big This American Life phase. And yeah, I think that's like every like intro podcast person is like, This American Life is amazing. And I haven't listened to it in a while, but every time I go back and listen to This American Life, I'm like, damn.
I even bought this NPR book.
Oh, that's cool. They're so good. Every time I listen, I'm like, damn it, they know how to like craft a story and they know how to get to you. And I really love audio storytelling. And so I thought that was sort of the direction that I wanted to go. But as soon as I started doing more like journalistic interview podcasts, I quickly found out that it was very time consuming. And I didn't have the time to sit there and edit everything, because it's not just like editing the person that you're interviewing. It's like writing out a script for yourself and editing editing what you're saying and be like, oh, this is Jose. Jose is from Calexico and he blah, 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 blah. And then Jose comes in, the audio comes in, and then you have to like, all of that, all the sound effects. It's all so hard. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm like, I need to just make a podcast where it's just me interviewing somebody else and just having a normal conversation. And so I started interviewing my friends. And then I was like, I'm running out of friends. I only have so many people. And then I tried doing episodes by myself, and I don't mind them because I do feel like I can ramble on for a bit. But I feel like when I start rambling, I'm like, who cares? Like, who really wants to listen to me ramble about something? And so then recently I was like, no, I need to expand my podcast and I need to figure out like what direction I want to go with it, because we would do, it was really just me working on it, but I would do one episode a month. And our listenership and our, just that was just really like stagnant. Like we weren't getting a lot of downloads and things like that. And I was like, you know what? I think I need to do it. I need to start doing weekly podcasts. As they say that it just is better when you do weekly podcasts. So what I did was I started batch recording, and doing a bunch of interviews and then having like 5 episodes at a time that I could just, start putting out and whatever. And reaching out to people and interviewing them over Zoom. And I think Zoom is like probably the easiest thing because you can just like hit record and it saves the audio.
Yeah.
But having these conversations, because I've been talking to a lot of different people over the last, I think like 2 months, I think since I like started the TikTok, I've been talking to a lot of different people over Zoom, and I'm like, man, this is crazy. Like, we're talking right now, you're in California, I'm in Texas. Like, it's wild to talk to all of these people and have these conversations. And that's what's really cool about podcasting. So I think podcasting is definitely something like, I'm not making any money from it now. I would like to. But even if I didn't make any money from it, I would still do it. Like, I still really enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, to me, like, I kind of started the same way you did, like where I kind of wanted to put my feelings. Like, there was a point where I was kind of like angry at the leadership here in Calexico, city council and mayor and all that stuff. And I kind of wanted to do a podcast where I kind of like bashed them, talk crap about them. But later on, I found out, you know what? Why would I want to bring my, all these negative attention to me or to my city? Just why not just highlight, the positive things going on here, and just have conversations with people in the valley. But later on, like right now I'm talking to you and you're not even from the valley. I mean, you're from a different valley.
Yeah.
But yeah, later on it turned out to be more of a podcast, where I have conversations with people, that are doing really cool things that I want to talk about. I want to learn about, and hopefully the people that are listening to are learning something new or finding or just being entertained, by our conversation. And I watched this guy called Philip DeFranco, and he kind of like has the perfect name for a podcast that he recently started. It's called A Conversation With, which is, a really good name for a podcast, kind of like similar to what I'm doing. It's just a conversation with whoever is my guest. And yeah, like, I think we all start podcasts with something in mind. Like you said, like, This American Life is a really awesome podcast, but at the end you listen to all the people that work for the podcast and you're like, no wonder it's really good, because it's like for me, it's only me. There's a lot of times where the other day I was watching a movie, I think, on my computer and taking notes for this interview. And my wife's like, "Oh, you're taking notes on the movie?" I'm like, "No, I'm taking notes for my next episode." It's like, "Oh, okay, you're multitasking." I'm like, "Yeah." So, it takes time. And yeah, like I said, it's only one person. I don't know if you have somebody else that helps you, but like you said, like I do make a little bit of money that goes back into the podcast. I buy some of the equipment. I made some masks for some of my sponsors with my logo. I do try to give back to the community. I made a giveaway and stuff like that. But yeah, like even if I didn't get any money, like I would still do this because I just like, I'm gonna be honest, I don't like talking, but I like doing this, talking to. Yeah, like when it comes to like talking to some people, new people in person, I'm kind of like not. Same. It's not my thing. But when it comes to like this kind of thing, when I get to pick the person I want to talk to, is different than having somebody new come up to you and like kind of like start a conversation. But yeah, and Pants Optional is also a website, right?
Yeah, the bigger brand is Pants Optional. And we were doing essays and blogs, and we have a dad hat, like still have like a hat that I need to finish selling. Like, wait, I have one right here. So it says, pants, and it's like a light tan color, and it's pants in pink. So the entire brand is just sort of like Pants Optional sounds funny. And I think it's sort of like, it kind of draws your attention when you see it or when you hear it and you're like, oh, what is that? And our Instagram handle is at pants. And the whole thing just started because when we were in college, we realized that we hated wearing pants, and it's just like jeans suck, and I don't want to wear jeans. But you have to go out and be like a functional member of society and like wear pants. And so I think like now what it's sort of morphed into as the brand is really like a candid conversation, right? Like pants and like pants optional is really about sitting down and having feeling comfortable and having a conversation with someone about something that I'm interested in and that could interest somebody else. But I think the whole idea surrounding pants optional is like, what is this time we're going through in our lives? Like adulthood is so weird, and like I don't think there's certain milestones of adulthood. Like some people go to college, some people get married, some people have kids, jobs, getting fired, like all of these things that I want to talk about on the podcast, because I feel like I didn't get enough of that growing up, and I didn't like, no one was there. I was the oldest, like I'm the oldest, and I sort of have the podcast as like me being a big sister and being like, hey, like these are topics that no one told me about that I want to talk to you about. Or like, these are topics that I've been thinking about and that I want to work through or ask someone about who is like an expert or whatever. And oftentimes I think like there's so many podcasts out there. And when I think about that, I'm like, what's the point of me having another, like just another podcast out in the world? There are so many podcasts out there. And like, I think a lot of people sometimes go into a podcast. Like you said, you've been doing yours for 3 years. I've been doing mine for 2. And a lot of people go into a podcast and they have all of the intention, all of the energy in the world. And then they realize like, oh man, this is hard. And then they just sort of drop off. And I don't want to shame those people. Like that's fine. But definitely like when you go into podcasting, part of it is really a passion project. And it really is because there's something inside you that you just want to keep, you know, diving into and talking about. And like, it's crazy how many people you can meet. Like you've had over 100 episodes. I'm only, I think, like at episode maybe like 20 something, maybe 30. So not very many yet. But yeah, like there's so many things to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you mentioned, you know, all these podcasts and, you know, sometimes like you feel like I felt it, or like, you know, is anybody listening to this crap, you know? Especially when, you know, this week I found out, you know, that Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett have a podcast. I'm like, am I really competing against these guys? Like, you know, are people going to be like, oh, should I listen to their podcast or this other podcast? But you know what? Yeah, like you said, it's if it's only like 10 people that listen to this, but you know, they find it interesting and fun, you know, that's all that matters. You know, to me, you know, I get to meet you, I get to talk to you, I get to learn, you know, all these things that you're going through and how you got into what you're doing now. And you know, that's more than enough for me. You know, I don't really, and especially during the pandemic, like everybody started a freaking podcast. Yeah. And the freaking Obama and what's his name? Michelle
Obama, right?
Well, Michelle started one, and then Barack with who was it?
I didn't know he started one.
Yeah, with he's a singer, Bruce Springsteen.
Obama started a podcast with Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah,
I that's news to me.
So it's like everybody has, you know, podcasts, but you know. And the funny thing that, you know, here in my valley, people tell me like, oh, you know, that's something new. I'm like, no, you know, podcasts have been around since like. Yeah,
they've been around. I want to say, I mean, for a long, I mean, This American Life has been going on for a long time, but I mean, they were a radio show, and I think it's like 2 podcasters diving into the history of podcasts. I think somewhere around like 2013 or 2011. I know they started like way before, like 2000, early 2000s, but I think around 2013-ish is when they started to get more traction.
Yeah.
And I remember being in college, I think like 2016, 2017. And my professor was like, he was the one who introduced me to This American Life. And he was like, I want everyone to listen to this. And I was like, what is this? And then I was like, where has this been all my life? Why did I not know about podcasts? And if I had known, like, I'm sure people soon, I'm sure you're going to be able to like major in podcasting or something, you know?
Yeah. But I remember when we first moved in here to my house, it was like 2008, I want to say. And I remember like doing yard work, like, cause we're putting a sprinkler system. So like, I was like trenching, and I you know how music, like some songs take you back to some, this summer when, I did this, blah, blah. So like, listening to Kevin Smith, you know who Kevin Smith is?
Kevin Smith, the director?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's had a podcast for like forever.
Yeah.
He has several. He has like a company, with a lot of podcasts that he manages. So I remember like listening to his podcast and, trenching in my backyard. So like listening to him like takes me to that time when I was like trenching in the middle of summer, like 110 degrees. So yeah, like, podcasts have, and it's crazy, like to me, like when people hear my channel, like, oh yeah, podcasting, yeah, it's something new. Like, yeah, I'm like, no, like, I mean, I've been doing it at least for 3 years, and it's been way older than that. And yeah, like to me, like it's crazy because I don't know if it's the same for you in your valley, but like things like technology, like take a while to get here, even like clothing. Yeah. So like,
oh yeah, for sure.
So like that's also like one of my passions is like to get more people here in the valley, like. Because when I started my podcast, it was my other friend Gil and myself that kind of like did a podcast like on a weekly basis or like regularly. And then people started reaching out to me like, oh, I want to start a podcast. Can you, tell me what to get? And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Because to me, it's like the more people that have a podcast are the more people that are going to start listening to a podcast here in the valley. And more people are going to maybe listen to me. But it's like, to me, a podcast, there's a podcast for everybody. I listen to all kinds of podcasts, comedy, news, all kinds of podcasts. So the more people that listen to podcasts here in the valley, there's a bigger chance of them listening to me and kind of like, so yeah, like that's one of my passions, like to get more people here in the valley to listen to a podcast, whether it's mine or not. Just, find something that you like, and because I hardly ever listen to music anymore. It's just like I'm always listening to podcasts.
Same.
And people, and it's, what the crazy thing is, like when I was a little kid, I remember going to Mexicali, and there was this guy that from a radio station in Mexicali that just read the newspaper. You could literally hear him like turn the pages, and he was on the radio. And my dad used to always listen to him. I was like, man, why are we listening to somebody talk on the radio? And now, I do that thing, like I talk on kind of like, it's a radio thing, I talk on the radio. And the funny thing is, like, I don't even think anybody in my family listens to my podcast. I don't know if it happens to you. But even the other day, they interviewed me here in Calexico because of my podcast. And I was on Facebook, and my mom's like, oh, te miré, but no te entendí because you were talking in English. So I'm like, oh, I'll translate it for you later. But yeah, like it's crazy. Like, I don't know if it happens to you, like people, your family don't really listen to you, or you don't really mind.
No, I don't care. I prefer them to not listen to my podcast because I feel like my podcast is such a personal, and it's personal, right? But my podcast is such a personal part of me. And not necessarily that I would mind, just that like I would feel exposed. Like, oh, I think I tried. Like I told my parents like once, right? And I was like, oh, hey, like I have a podcast. And they're like, ¿qué es eso? And I try to explain, but like they don't keep up with it, And I'm also not promoting it. Like my parents are just like on Facebook. I'm not promoting it on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's the podcasting experience is interesting. I think it's a big introvert thing too. Like, I'm super introverted, and I like the fact that this is my space. I get to make my podcast how I want. I get to interview who I want, and I get to put it out when I want. And so it's very personal. I'm just like, you can tell me about my podcast and I hope people are listening. And whenever someone is like, oh, hey, I listened to your podcast, I'm like eternally grateful. I'm like, thank you so much for telling me, because I feel like nobody listens to the podcast, or even if they did, like no one gives me feedback on it. So yeah, it's a very like personal project. And I love audio, so it just works.
Do you get, when people sometimes like give me compliments on the podcast and I don't know how to, to act or, say thank you, like it's kind of like awkward sometimes a little bit. Does it happen to you?
Yeah, I had someone recently, like an old college friend, and they were like, hey, I've been listening to I've kind of like been binge listening to your podcast because, I feel like I have a couple episodes on like feeling when you're in your 20s, like you're running out of time and feeling like, oh, I need to do everything now. I need to do everything before I hit 30. I need to do everything before I hit 25. And how that feeling isn't, we need to sort of like let go of that feeling. And so this person reached out to me and they were like, I listened to this episode and, I feel so much better because I know that like I'm not alone in feeling like I'm running out of time, even though I'm, 24, 25 or whatever. And that I was like, that's so nice. Thank you so much. That means so much to me that like it resonates with somebody else. So yeah, it's exciting, but it's not like everyone is telling me how good it is all the time. Like,
yeah. Like to me, it's like, especially when it's like election season, I'll try to talk to like some of the local politicians just so that people that are gonna vote, they kind of get to know a little bit about the candidate. So, and then it happened to be that one time one of the candidates that I interviewed won his election, and then like a couple years into his term, he got busted by the FBI for kind of selling cannabis licenses to an FBI undercover. So like, like I noticed that one episode got a lot of hits. Yeah. And then I was like, you know what if the FBI listened to my podcast because like I was in it?
Oh my God, probably.
Yeah. It's like, damn, like I'm like, for sure they had to listen because it was just crazy. The whole situation was crazy. And I was like, yeah, they had to have listened to it. And
that's so funny.
Yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, like now, like more and more like people are like, oh, I listened to your podcast or I saw you, or because even the local paper, like sometimes like if they write an article that is related to one of my guests, they'll link to it. So that's pretty cool. Like I think that's really, really supportive to, that they're doing that. Shout out to Calexico Chronicle and Richard Brown for doing that. But yeah, like, I'm getting to feel that support from the community. Where before us, like I said, it was like people didn't really know what a podcast was. Like I kind of had to explain it to them, and I was like, really, like, but yeah, like it's getting way, way better, and yeah, I'm sure you also feel that way. Where like more people are, and you mentioned consistency. I noticed that consistency for me was a really important thing. Like when I do a weekly thing, like people. Like Sundays and Mondays, I see a lot of hits because I put in a new episode and then like that Sunday or Monday that it gets a lot of hits. So I'm like, yeah, the weekly thing is really important for podcasting. But yeah, it's great. I digress. But yeah, and there's so many things that we have in common. Even though like our age gap is kind of. Yeah. Especially like the fact that we watch a lot of TV. I think that was really it shaped me a lot into and you can see it on my toys because a lot of the toys that I buy is based on the things I watch on TV. And did you ever watch stand up? You never.
Yeah, I loved watching stand up like in high school and stuff, and probably was not watching good like the stand up that I should have been watching. I was watching things like Daniel Tosh. Do you remember him?
Yeah. He has a Tosh.0.
Yeah, that guy. And Louis C.K. who, you know, is non-existent now. But I grew up like watching, you know, these types of comedians. And it wasn't sort of until I got older and like I went to college and I was like, oh man, these jokes are racist or like really misogynistic. And now, you know, I think Netflix is sort of making it so much easier to watch a bunch of different stand-up comedians.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I think media, just media in general, like just really shaped me and like continues to shape me. Like first it was TV and now it's currently podcasting. And I listen to, I think, I don't know, I probably have like more than 70 podcasts or something that I subscribe to. I obviously don't listen to all of them all the time. But the main podcast, it's always sort of like, I go through phases of like, you know, I was really into like This American Life and I was really into like the journalistic type of podcast. Now I'm into more of like deep dive podcasts. Currently I'm like really into this podcast called You're Wrong About, and they just do, it's like two people and they get together and they just deep dive into something like cults or you know, something like the satanic panic from the 80s. You know, just all of these like cultural moments that shape us as a society, and they just sort of debunk myths or whatever. And that's like the one that I'm currently like very into. And yeah, so yeah, media like continues to shape me. And, you know, I hope that one day I'm able to do that with my own media. I think that would be really cool. And, you know, like, I don't know what direction my podcast is going to take someday, but, you know, I hope that I continue to do my podcast for, you know, a few years or something.
Yeah. And to me, like when it comes to the podcast, and it's like a hobby, and I really enjoy it. You know, like, you know, I want to keep doing it till people don't want to be on it anymore.
Yeah.
Because you know what, and something I wanted to ask you, like, to me in the beginning, a lot of people didn't really want to be on the podcast, especially like I said, podcasting for people down here was something really new, so they didn't really know what it was. So they kind of like, I had a couple of people that kind of like vetted me, like, oh yeah, I talked to so and so and they said you were cool, you're legit, you're not gonna like harass me or anything. So but now, like, you know, thank God that I've you know, have like 50-50 is like people I ask, and the other 50 is like people that ask me like, hey, can I be on? How's that going for you, like when it comes to like having guests on your podcast?
We recently had a couple of people ask us to be on. So like our first 2 episodes of this year were people who asked us if they could come on. And I was like, that never happened before. And I was so excited. I was like, please, thank you so much. And obviously, like, at least, I don't know about you, but I try to find people who are going to fit the topic, the brand, or, you know, whatever. And so luckily those 2 people who had contacted us and emailed and asked to be on the podcast, I was so excited, and I was like, this makes my job so much easier if you're asking to come on. And I really do wish that more people would do that. But currently I'm the one who's sort of having to ask and look for people like who have the content that, you know, we might want to have on. And so far it's been good, but it's a very exhausting process to
where do you
schedule and stuff.
Where do you go to like look for guests?
Instagram.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, Instagram is the place. It really is. And I know, I think you reached out to me on TikTok, and I like opened up my TikTok messages because I figured like there must be, you know, people who want to interview or do things like that. So for that, it's helped. But Instagram really seems to be the place to find experts, because I think podcasting only goes so far when you use your friends, depending on the topic of conversation. But after a while, like, you want to find someone who like knows what they're talking about. And it's especially hard when there are people who might not be familiar with the podcast dynamic. And so it's hard to get them to talk. Like you might ask them a question
Yeah.
and then they just answer it flat. And then
Yeah.
you're like, I need more out of you. And so you have to find and maneuver like how to ask the right question so you can get the content that you want. And yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, that's happened to me where like I've had a couple people who are like, you ask them a question that you're like, this question is going to fill up a lot of my time because I can see where this person can give me a lot of information, and then they'll answer with a yes or no, or like, it's like, really like dude, yeah, it's like, oh my God. But yeah, like, that's where I go a lot to. Instagram is a lot, a place where I, especially locally, and I'm guessing it's harder for you because, you have, like, specific topics that you kind of want to talk to about. For me, it's, I'm really flexible. I talk to all kinds of people, and it's just conversations. It's not really. I don't have a focus as to what. Sometimes it's kind of hard, like to describe my podcast because it's so.
Broad.
Yeah, and but it's something that really helps me get people on, and because it's not like something specific. And yeah, like for you, like I can imagine. But yeah, Instagram's really good because, you use hashtags and all these, and you can find like the people that you specifically are looking for. And that's how I started in the beginning. For a while, I was looking for a lot of local artists or local creators that were doing like cool things in the Valley, and I would bring them on and talk to them and meet them. And I've met a lot of people through Instagram. And it's funny because I have a lot of people that I talk to that I really don't know in person, but I talk to through Instagram, and I was like, who are you talking to? I was like, oh, it's my friend. What friend? Yeah. Well, my friend from Instagram. He's not your friend. He's just somebody you met on Instagram. Yeah, but we're friends. We talk almost on a daily basis, and then yeah, she finds it funny that I meet all these people on Instagram, and I really don't meet them. But
yeah,
but I mean, and like you said, like to me, like I've gone to learn and know how important it is to network and have all these connections and yeah, like before, like I didn't really want to talk to people, but now it's like, especially for when it comes to content for my podcast, it's like I want to get to talk to more people and know more people because I know there's a lot of people out there that are doing like really, really cool shit, and that's how I find out. Like Instagram is like really, really important to me for finding guests.
Yeah, I also think like because of the pandemic, and sort of going out is harder. And I mean, I'm, now it's kind of more lenient, at least in Texas.
Oh, yeah.
It's more lenient. And, but I'd never go out to actually record my podcast. But the thing with me is that I work alone. I don't have coworkers. I don't even have a lot of friends in the Valley, because all of my friends moved away, and I just have family that lives here. And so I'm constantly surrounded by family. And sometimes the conversations with your family are not the conversations you want to be having. So having the podcast and sort of having to look for different people who have things to say has been really good for like, just like my mental health. And knowing like that there's so many ways that you can make a connection with somebody. And one of my last episodes, it was a few episodes ago, I think, but I interviewed this girl, and she was living in Montreal. So she was in Canada. I'm in South Texas, and I'm like, this is crazy. Yeah. Like, I'm still amazed by it all the time. And I had a great conversation with her. And I'm just like, these are things that would never be possible without like social media and without just like reaching out to people and finding common ground, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think, for me, the pandemic has been really helpful in the sense that it was before, when I used to do them in person, like it was really hard scheduling because it was really like most of the times it was like after work or on a Saturday, and finding a place to meet, because for a while I used to do them from my house, but sometimes I was like, do you really want to bring somebody that I don't know into my house?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I figured, I'd rather do it in a public place. And so yeah, like, Zoom has been really, really helpful in terms of scheduling because, you don't have to find a place to meet. where after work I'm free, on the weekends I'm free, and everybody's like at home. So on the weekends it has been really, really helpful to like record. So I don't know. Hopefully, I keep doing this, through Zoom sometimes. But I also want to do it in person because it's a lot different. The vibe,
the energy, the vibe, yeah.
and yeah, like just before I used to shake hands. I don't know how that's gonna go now with the whole COVID, but yeah, like it's just meeting somebody in person and being around other people is like super, super important for me in the podcast because, like I said, kind of like promoted itself when people saw me recording and talking to other people. But yeah, we've been talking for an hour and 20. I don't know if you've noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, like just so that we don't, because we could ramble for probably another hour, but I don't want to do that to you. Any closing thoughts that you might have?
Closing thoughts. No, I think it's really cool that you have a podcast specific to your valley and specific to your community. Like that's really cool. And I know there are podcasts here in my valley, but I haven't listened to them yet. And I think, like the fact that you grew up there and like you have a podcast about the place you grew up, like that's so cool. And that dedication to community, I think, is amazing. But, I think at the end of the day, like we're all looking for a sense of community and connection. And luckily podcasting brings that. Other than that, I don't know, go into a store and hear my voice if you'd like. Check out my TikTok.
yeah, for reals. I'll put a link to like your social media on the show notes so that people can check it out. But you mentioned community, and I think that's something that I got right away from you, even though like I didn't even know you were from Border Town. Just the fact that you like we make fun that I'm going to Gualmart. Like whenever I text my wife, like you need anything from Walmart, I put Gualmart. That's Gualmart. That's how I write it down. You need anything from Gualmart. And when I saw that, I was like, man, that's crazy. Like and I didn't even know like where exactly you were from. Like if you were from Arizona or Texas, I knew like she has to be from a border town or from a Mexican community culture, like because I don't know if other like Salvadorians or any other people say Gualmart. I don't know how they call it, but for us it's Gualmart. Like like that's how we know it. So like right away.
We didn't even talk about Spanglish. Like
yeah, so
like Spanglish is huge.
Yeah, for real. It's like it's and I feel like we need to get more out of the Spanglish out there because I don't think we see it a lot in media.
No, not enough.
So
I like I don't know if you watched the show. It was on Netflix. It was called Gentified.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and like those shows are fun. Like it was fun. I don't think I finished it.
Yeah, me neither.
But I saw I think there's a lot of Mexican representation, but like California Mexican representation, and the only like Texas Mexican representation is like Selena. And I mean, it's kind of the same, but in shows like Gentified, where it's like, oh, wow, like Mexican American representation, it's always like, it's sometimes Spanglish, but what it generally tends to be is like the younger kids are speaking English and the parents are speaking Spanish and the parents speak to the kids in Spanish and the kids speak back in English. And I'm just like if it was real, like you would speak like English with your friends, but Spanish with your parents. Like, I don't know, there are certain things like that. And like when I'm recording, I think I said this on TikTok, I don't remember, but I had to say Burlington in Spanish, but I say Burlington, or I say DJ Maxx, or I say, Walmart is a big one, obviously. And it doesn't sound natural to me when I'm saying it. And I'm like, hola, compradores de Walmart. It doesn't sound right.
And it's like when
is so cool.
When we go to Mexico and we're like, oh, si me das una Pepsi, or si me das una squirt.
Pixie. Yeah.
It's like they don't say squirt, they say square or spray. So I get it. Like whenever I go to Mexicali, like I change the way I talk and it's yeah, it's hard, like when you so used to saying it, especially when you're saying it in Spanish, like a sentence in Spanish, and you're adding like a name brand that you normally say in Spanish as well. Like it's hard to switch back and forth. And so like you mentioned in your TikTok that you were able to use Gualmart. Has it been used yet, or?
I recorded it. I don't know if I think it is being used, but I don't personally shop at Walmart, and they also don't have the Spanish recording in all Walmarts. Like they have them in more Hispanic dense community Walmarts. So I haven't been to a Walmart here, so it could be here, but I have not heard it yet. Yeah. I'll have to, because like I said, I don't know if they do like a Spanish version of their announcements here in Calexico, but next time I go to Walmart, I'll check it out. But well, we're at an hour and 25. I want to thank you so much. Like I said, I could talk to you for hours, but I don't want to do that to you. But yeah, like I said, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing, everything that we talked about. We talked about so many things that it was really, really interesting. And like I said, that I can relate to a lot of things that you go through in your border town, that I go through in my border town. And it's really cool that you're in Texas and in California, and we get to have this conversation and share our life stories and our podcasting stories, and it's just cool. I think that it was really cool. I wasn't expecting you to respond when you did, so I was really excited, and I'm glad that you did. Thank you for having me. I've never had the chance to talk about being from a border town, so thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. Well, thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed, this episode, like I did. Make sure to go follow Edeliz on her social media. I'll leave all that in the description below. And yeah, make sure you guys stay safe, wear your face mask, social distance, and we'll see you guys in the next one.